Hey everyone. Before the video begins, I want to apologize for my voice. It's been pretty hoarse all week and it still isn't great. However, I wanted to make you all a video, so I hope you'll enjoy it regardless. Number 1. The Old Shack. Until I was in my early teens, my family lived in the city. My dad was able to retire very early, and he bought a house out in the country. I was quite surprised when I finally saw the house, because it was far out of town. It really was about an hour drive to the nearest town, and half of that was on dirt and gravel roads. I hadn't ever experienced anything like that before. It was nice, but it was hard to make friends outside of school. So when summer came along, I was rarely able to do much more than spend time with my brother. When I was 16, my brother went off to college. At that point, I began spending a lot of time by myself. I found myself really wanting to get out of the house as much as possible. You know how teenagers can be. I didn't really feel like spending too much time around my parents. I began walking along the country roads quite often. It gave me a lot of time to be by myself. In the beginning, it was mostly during the day, but my parents also used to go to bed really early, so I began taking walks at night as well. It was pretty cool because there were no street lamps along the gravel roads. It got to be so dark that it was hard to see much. I brought a flashlight, but I never used it. During full moons, the ambiance of the walk was pretty cool. Now, earlier I mentioned that I didn't really have any friends apart from school, but that didn't mean there weren't houses around. It was a bit of a hike to each one of them though, and we really didn't know any of the people who lived in them. But for the most part, the houses were all retired and wealthy people. So the houses were down long driveways, and they were all very nice. One night, I was out really late. I guess I had some teenage angst, and I had to take a walk and sort my thoughts out a bit. So I walked down a road I had never been down before. It was really creepy out too, and I guess I enjoyed that aspect of it as well. That night, it was pretty close to being a full moon too. I guess I had gone out rather far this time, and I sort of lost track of how long I had actually been out. It was then that I turned on another road, or at least, at that point, something that I had assumed was a road. It was actually a dirt driveway, as after walking down it for a short period of time, I saw a really old shack. This was weird, mostly because the shack was really out of place in the area. Remember that this was a really well-off area, plenty of wealthy people. It was so out of place that I became very curious about it. There were no vehicles in the driveway or anywhere around the shack, so I assumed that it was abandoned. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided that I wanted to check it out. First, before I got too close, I took my flashlight out, and I shined it directly at the shack. It was definitely old, and much of the wood it was made out of looked very gray and untreated. I then flashed the light all around the yard, making sure that there really were no vehicles out there. When I confirmed this, I decided to come closer. I kept shining my flashlight all over the place. I noticed that there was a porch, and I also noticed an old porch swing. There was a gentle breeze, and it was more than enough, however, to make the porch swing sway a little. Since I had decided that there was no way anyone was there, I wanted to check it out. I got over to the steps of the porch and walked up them, planting my last foot on the porch. The swing was on the left, while the steps were on the right. I looked at the swing and noticed it was made of some kind of metal. I don't know why I found this interesting, but I did. So I approached it. I was still shining the flashlight around when I was startled, hearing an owl hooting. The jump made me move the flashlight, which then hit the corner of the house behind the swing. It was then that I noticed a face peering out from the corner of the house, looking at me. It was obviously a person, but it barely looked like one. In the moment that I noticed it, I was able to see that this person was horribly deformed. And also in that moment, I heard him make an owl sound. I then heard a creaking and noticed that the front door was opening. I fled quickly down the step and into the driveway, running down it at top speed without looking back. I didn't know if the people were following me. I just kept running. When I got to the end of the driveway, I kept running even more. I may have been running for up to 40 minutes when I finally slowed down. Turning around, I did not see anyone following me. However, this did nothing to make me feel any better. I was a long way from home, and I was walking on a dirt road in the hills in the middle of the night. Every noise caused my anxiety to rise and my heart to beat faster. Every blow of the wind scared me. I didn't even feel better when I got home. That fall, I told one of my friends in school about what had happened. He claimed that there was a story about deformed, inbred hillbillies out in the hills around there. I think he was just trying to scare me, and I have to give him credit. It worked. Number 2. Dirt Road Hitchhiker. I think I may be judged really badly for this story. However, I was just an idiot kid at the time, and truly didn't mean any harm. I was just trying to protect myself. When I was 16 and I got my driver's license, it was like a whole new world for me. I was so happy, and any time that I could, I would be out driving. I had to get myself a part-time job in order to pay for all the gas that I used. We lived out of town, on a nearby ridge. One weekend, my parents were out of town. I had to remain home, because of my job not giving me the weekend off. I didn't mind, because I hadn't wanted to go anyway. The very first night my parents were gone, I got off work really late. I drove home, and right out of town, I noticed that there was a hitchhiker. I knew my parents would kill me for picking him up, but I immediately felt a bit of altruism go through my body. So I stopped and I picked him up. Ever do something, and then immediately wish that you hadn't? Well, this was the case for me. The guy was dressed in camouflage, but the only thing that I thought was that he was possibly a vet. Although he thanked me, he made me feel very uncomfortable. I asked where he was going, and it wasn't too far from where I lived. In fact, it was right off the first dirt road turn you had to take to get to the ridge. I told him that, and he laughed, commenting that he felt it was an interesting coincidence. Well, I guess it was, so I really couldn't see anything weird about that. The man didn't talk much, but he did keep looking at me. I tried to make small talk, and I asked him if he was a vet. He had the weirdest answer, telling me that he wanted to enlist in the Vietnam War, but he wasn't able to pass the psychological evaluation. It was such a weird comment that all I could do was laugh nervously. There was no response that I could possibly come up with to that, but it did make me nervous. As we drove along, the man asked me where I lived. He told me I should show him my house when we drove by it. It was then, when he leaned forward a little and his jacket opened a bit. In that split second, I noticed a rather large hunting knife in his inside pocket. My whole body tensed up. I tried not to let it show, though. In my panic, I pointed to a driveway as we went by this blue house. It wasn't my house, but I decided suddenly I didn't want this man to know where I lived. He told me he thought that I had a nice place, and it would be interesting to see inside it sometime. I mean, how do you answer something like that? I was just convinced the man was going to kill me. I kept trying to think of something to do. But mostly, I tried to do my best to not look scared. Finally, he told me to stop near a driveway. When I did, I noticed that it was for a house that I knew he did not live in. My parents were friends with the people in the house. However, I was trying to get him out of my car, so I did what he asked. He had me drop him off in the road, right at the mailbox. I turned the car around in the driveway and then drove off. I watched the man out of my rearview mirror, and not surprisingly, he never walked down the driveway. He just watched me until we were both out of each other's view. I was terrified when I got home, even though I hadn't told the guy where I really lived. I locked all of the doors and all the bolts. I got my dog to spend the entire night right by me so I would feel safe. The following afternoon, I was still sleeping. A loud knock on the door woke me up. When I answered it, it was the police. They had a lot of questions for me and told me that a house had been broken into. They were trying to determine if I had seen or experienced anything weird. I immediately thought of the hitchhiker, and I explained to them what I had seen. However, I told them that I dropped him off and hadn't seen him. The house I had indicated was mine had been broken into. An old woman lived in the house, and she had been attacked. She had been stabbed and was in a coma. When she recovered, she told the police that the man was asking her over and over where her grandson was, and she was confused. I gave them my description of the man. I hoped that they had picked someone up, but they hadn't. The following night, I was once again terrified. I had every indication that something bad was possible. I knew a violent man was out there, and he knew I had lied to him. I expected every night for him to show up, but he never did. As far as I'm aware, he was never caught either. But yeah, I feel tremendously guilty for the lie, because I feel like I inadvertently put that old woman in danger. I just wasn't thinking. Number 3. Overnight. I had an awful experience one night when I was driving through some back roads in the Appalachian Mountains. I was trying to get to an area to take some pictures for a book on hauntings. However, I ended up getting lost. And if there is one place you really don't want to get lost in, it has to be the mountains. To make matters worse, as I was trying to find my way out, my car overheated. I didn't want to get out and try to find someone to help, as I hadn't seen any sort of business or house in quite a while. It was also getting dark, and I knew that it was going to be getting really cold. I often slept in the back seat of my car and had blankets and pillows for that. In fact, I had expected this to happen anyway. So I decided to get some sleep, and I would go to try and find help in the morning if someone didn't come by before that. The first time I woke up, I was very disorientated. It took me a little bit of time to remember even where I was. Once I did, I then began to wonder exactly what had woken me up. My car windows were all foggy, and I didn't feel like wiping them off. So I listened, and all I heard were crickets and frogs. So I pulled the blanket back over my head, and I went back to sleep. I woke up again, this time with a bit of a jump. Again, I was not sure exactly what had woken me up. I listened, and once again, only heard crickets and frogs. I decided that it must have been the cold that kept waking me up. I bundled up and went back to bed. The third time I woke up, I knew that I had heard something. It sounded like someone or something walking on gravel. My mind immediately started thinking something like a doe, but scarier thoughts entered my head too, like maybe some sort of wild cat. I actually never thought person. I listened until the noises stopped. I reached under the passenger side seat and felt to make sure my gun was there. It was. I always kept it under there for protection. When I noticed it, I went back to sleep. The next time I woke up, I was beginning to get annoyed with my inability to just sleep through the night. I wanted to see what time it was, so I pulled the blanket off of my head. Before I could even attempt to get up and look at the clock, I noticed a figure standing outside the back driver's side door where my feet were, and it was looking at me. I grabbed under the seat and grabbed my gun from under it and brought it out. Although the windows were really fogged up, whoever was standing there must have seen the gun. He hauled off, hit the back window, shattering it. I was about to shoot, but it immediately pulled away from the window. I heard crunching gravel sounds as it ran off. I lay there in my car, terrified. I was wondering who the person was. Why were they looking in my car window? He must have had bad intentions, or why would he have broken the window as he ran off? Had he been there every time that I woke up? And could that have been why I woke up? I remained awake all night. Oh, it was miserable too. I was scared and cold, and the back seat of my car was covered in glass. I kept expecting the stranger to return at any moment. If he had intended to, he didn't do it until a car finally pulled over and asked me if I needed help. They gave me a ride to town where I could get some sleep and then call a tow truck in the morning. When the car got to the mechanic's shop, all of the other windows were shattered as well. Whoever had been there that night had come back. I was upset that my car had a bunch of shattered windows, but I was so glad I wasn't there when it happened. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. I want to wish Mortis Media well for reaching 70,000 subscribers, even though he hasn't quite gotten there yet. I've recorded 5 stories for his special, but that collaboration won't appear on my channel. I will link to it when it's up so you can hear it though. If you want to read print versions of these stories, check them out at the Killer Orange Cat subreddit. Links to that and the merchandise store are in the description. In the meantime, if you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the subscribe button below, or using the icon of Ichigo the cat that will appear at the end of this closing. Feel free to leave me a comment to let me know what you think of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can always follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter, using the links in the description. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please send it to the address provided in the description. My main requirement is that the story is original, meaning it has not yet been read on any other YouTube channel. And please, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.